Hi. For our Ambassador series, we're always looking for women to interview who are inspirational in one way or another. So today, I'm absolutely delighted to be interviewing Janet Ellis, whose career spans acting, presenting on television, particularly children's television, and she's recently been published as an author. So Janet, you started your working life as an actress. Were there any signs of your acting prowess when you were a child?
I started saying I wanted to be an actress long before I knew what it meant, I think. Nobody in my family was anything to do with the profession. I was probably about 10 when I really understood what it meant and knew that it resonated with me. My dad was in the army, so we travelled around quite a lot when I was a kid, but in one of his postings, somebody was running drama classes and I went along every Saturday and I had to learn a poem and then recite it, and obviously all the parents assembled. And I just remember this feeling of power, let's say, something about that moment when everything stops and you start and people listen. And I found it so enjoyable. It was because I loved the poem, actually. It was The Wild Swans That Called, and I loved the poem to such an extent that I thought people have heard this poem, they might not have heard it before, and I've been the one telling them. And yeah, a lot of showing off, of course, along the way. But yeah, it was something about that moment which is still really amazing.
So tell us how your big break came, which was with the children's television programme Jigsaw, I think, in the late 70s. How did that come about?
I'd been working as an actress by then for quite a few years, and I had actually just had my first child, Sophie, when I was asked to go and audition for Jigsaw. And I was a bit unsure about it because Sophie was a tiny baby. But the director, producer, writer, everything on that programme was a guy called Clive Doig, who is still luckily around and brilliant. And he loved the idea of the fact I just had a child. A very unusual person, I think. In fact, at one point he said to me, after he'd given me the job, oh, you could bring her to rehearsals, which even then I knew would be disastrous for me, for Sophie, for everybody. But it was the fact that he understood that I just had a baby, I think, that made it much easier to go back to work, because that's always a bit of a tough call. And it was a very small series as far as I was concerned. We did 6 programmes. It was a puzzle game. But there were bits in it where I spoke to camera because we were telling people where to send their entries for this competition, and there were bits where we gave clues. And people started saying to me, you could maybe think about presenting. And I was actually mortified because I thought, I'm an actress, I'm not a presenter. But it definitely sowed a seed.
I remember you best watching on Blue Peter with my own children, in fact, in the 80s. So tell us some of the highlights of being on that programme at such a brilliant time.
Yeah, how long have you got? I mean, I was reluctant to go for the interview for that too, because it was, when I'd said to my agent, I might think about presenting, and she said, I've just heard there might be a vacancy on Blue Peter. I thought, I didn't mean that. I meant a little bit from time to time. Then obviously that was a full-on presenting job. But actually, most of us on the programme had started as actors. And I think it's because it kind of had a few crossover bits. I mean, it was a different time frame, but we learnt our scripts. We didn't have autocue when I worked on the programme. You were encouraged to be yourself, but a version of yourself, because obviously nobody wants everything about you. But there was something about it that resonated with me. It was a live programme and also huge fun. So in terms of highlights, I think exploring the British Isles was great for me because I hadn't spent much of my childhood here, so I suddenly got this free pass to go absolutely everywhere. And then there were amazing things, like I sang at the last night of the Proms with the BBC Symphony Chorus. I mean, I can hardly believe I'm saying that now. And things like going to London Zoo when it was freezing cold and chipping ice off the Tiger's Pond. I mean, we got to go everywhere we wanted to go, and a few places that nobody thought we would. And it was the most brilliant experience. And one of the other lovely things, which didn't necessarily happen because it's a job, but I did become great friends with all the presenters I worked with, and we're still in touch now. I think some people think we still live in a little house all together, but we do live separately, but we see each other a lot.
Yeah. And around that time, you had 3 quite young children. So
I had one when I started.
Yeah.
I had Sophie. Sophie was 4 when I started and 8 when I finished. So strictly speaking, she was too young to be a viewer because it stuck pretty closely to the 8 to 12 age limit that it had set itself. But then I became pregnant with my second child while I was still on the programme, which was, although not great in some people's eyes, I have to say, nothing to do with the viewers or anyone who was producing or editing the programme, but there was a question in the House of Parliament about how they could let an unmarried woman present. an unmarried mother, present the programme. But I certainly never got any flack anywhere from the viewers or from anyone on the team. And for the last few months of presenting the programme, it was like being let off games. They'd all go and do something really cold and high up, and they would come back to me in the studio and I'd go, oh, that looked cold and high up, let's make some biscuits.
And were there any challenges around juggling your young family with working really hard?
I think because I really hadn't given myself much time when that wasn't the case. I was 23 when I had Soph. I had only really just got going as an actress, so the timing was not great in some ways. But it did mean I never had to make that choice. And I'm sure for a lot of people it's hard trying to decide when you're going to start trying for a baby and then trying to adjust your working life. And of course I've always been freelance, so in layman's terms that means I've always been out of work some of the time. So it wasn't as though I was working flat out in an office from 7 till 7. So I've been pretty spoiled, I think. But I'm glad for me that I didn't have to make that choice. And in some ways it's got harder, and I've got 3 children, and it got harder as I had more children, simply because I knew what I was missing.
Yeah. I've seen you more recently on The Right Stuff, where I have to say I usually agree with everything that you say, which is nice. It's always nice when somebody is expressing their own opinion. How do you find now being on something like that, which is unscripted and live, actually? How difficult is that?
I think timing is key to a lot of these things. I think if I'd been asked to appear on The Right Stuff, even 5 years before it happened, I might have been a bit more cautious. I mean, I hope, here's hostage to fortune, but I hope I'm careful about using myself as an example a lot of the time, being cautious with my family and only using them when it absolutely has to be, and if it's something really personal, only if I've got their permission. But broadly, when it comes to current affairs, I really don't mind what I say, because it's easier to remember what you actually think than trying to pretend you've got another opinion. And it has given me a wonderful soapbox. I'm really grateful. I think my family are pretty grateful too that I've got somewhere to put all that stuff, because I've never been backward in coming forward. But it worked out that it was exactly the right time to just be myself with those opinions. And of course, if somebody disagrees, that's a challenge, and I hope I never upset someone with something I've ever said. But mostly it's my opinions coming out, so I think I'm on safe ground.
One of your children, Sophie Ellis Bextor, has achieved incredible and widespread fame as a pop singer.
She has.
So, which is absolutely lovely. How do you feel about Sophie's success?
Initially, when she first left school and was by then already signed to be in a band, I thought, well, that's going to be an adventure, and whatever happens, she's very young, she can change her mind several times over. Goodness knows I have. You don't have to nail your colours to the mast at 18 and decide who and what you're going to be. And she's pretty sorted, so she's a smart girl, and I thought she would be able to find her way through. People often said, oh, it's going to be great because you understand what she's doing. And I have to say, I did not. The music business is very different from most other professions, and I was a complete stranger there, so I couldn't give her advice about that. But I'm really impressed with and proud of the fact that she's coped as well as she has, because it is a heady thing, that sort of fame. I might be recognised by some nice people in their 30s and 40s now. She's recognised wherever she goes, pretty much. When we were all together, this was years ago, we all had a family holiday in Barcelona, and it was just after Groovejet had come out, which was her #1 hit. And we were just lining up like everyone does outside the Sagrada Familia, and this whole phalanx of Italian school children came towards us as they were heading into the same spot as us. And all of a sudden they stopped dead and they saw Sophie and they went, oh, Sophia. And that's when we all realised that this was much bigger than all of us thinking, this is fun. But I think because I'm not worried about her, I can feel really happy for her that it's gone as well. I think if I felt really protective of her, or if she didn't enjoy it, or if there were bits of it that she shirked, it would be difficult, because that's my first instinct with all of them, really, is to protect them and then celebrate.
Absolutely.
But she does handle it really well. And of course, for us, it's such fun. You know, we're with the band.
Absolutely, absolutely. You've recently become a published author with The Butcher's Hook, named by The Observer, I think, as one of the best new faces of fiction in 2016, which is absolutely brilliant. So very big change of direction for you. So why did you make that change and how do you find it?
Well, I have to be really honest here that obviously I'd left it quite late to write, but I'd always wanted to. And the longer I left it, the harder it got because, without wanting to sound twee, it was so important to me. It was so important that whatever I wrote was really me. And along the way, people have suggested that I tried writing stuff because I've always enjoyed it and made no secret of the fact. But a lot of the times the suggestions they made were not books that I would head for in the bookshop. They're fine if that's what people want to read, but they weren't my choice. And I was really frightened that whatever I wrote would have a kind of quality to it, you know, that I would give somebody a piece of work and they would go, yeah. And obviously it wouldn't be publishable and it would not satisfy anything commercial. And it wasn't necessarily, of course everyone wants to be published, but it wasn't necessarily that that was the goal. Initially, it was just about whatever I produced had to be really me. And that made me feel really nervous because I'm fond of saying I'm a team player. You know, I've always really enjoyed live television because you do feel part of a team. It's just as important that the camera gets it right as the presenter. But that's also another way of saying the buck doesn't stop with me. With writing, of course, it does. And the closer it got, and the more I realised that I might be in with a chance of even finishing a book and then possibly having it considered for publication, the more I realised that there was nothing standing between me and it at all. And even this side of it, I mean, it's heady stuff still, seeing it in book form, and I'm now working on book 2, but even now I'm aware of that, you know, it's like mind the gap, that precipice, and it's a long drop. But I also feel massively privileged that I'm getting the opportunity to talk like that at all, because it's a big thing. And it doesn't just come to people, I know that only too well. And it could all stop anytime soon, but I'm really glad it happened.
I think we'd probably both agree that we live in a very ageist society. What is it about that ageist society that really bugs you?
There's a lack of imagination, I think, about how age is dealt with. We are all going to live longer, so we've got to get used to that. That's a fact. And this is what it looks like when you get older. And I think there's an unhealthy parenthesis that swings into action when somebody might say very nicely, oh, you're looking great. And then there's a kind of, if not saying it, there's a little parenthesis for your age, as though you somehow got to make a superhuman effort to convince the world that actually you'd like to be mistaken for somebody younger. And I feel really strongly that I don't want to be mistaken. I don't want to be mistaken for my younger self or for another younger woman. They have their time. It's fun. Every year is fun. And I don't think you want to kind of calibrate yourself next to some invisible scale which says, could be doing better, look better for your age. Come on, make an effort. Because it's not real. It doesn't represent me, and I don't think it represents the vast majority of women. I'd also quite like them to find another role model than Helen Mirren. Helen does sterling stuff. She's a lovely woman. She's a great actress. Other 72-year-old women are available.
How do you feel about ageing and also about your ageing face in particular?
I think I, by and large, feel mostly okay. And I would imagine most people feel mostly okay. I hope there aren't too many people that feel mostly not okay, because I'd love them to be sitting here with us now, and for all sorts of reasons we could tell them why it is okay to be getting older. I think that the things that frighten me about it are not to do with how I look, and it is to do with fear. I don't want my world shrinking because I feel I can't get up and do things anymore. I would hate to feel so restricted, not just physically but mentally, by my own limitations, and I know they'd be things I was imposing. But as far as facially, I'm sure I do what everybody does, which is occasionally to catch sight of that old woman and think, oh, it's me in the shop window. And I've always made a point of really, this sounds terrible, but I always try and meet myself every day, and makeup's always been an enormous part of that. But There are mirrors everywhere in the house. I don't want to shy away from what's happening. I want to be absolutely at one with who this woman is and know her every time I look in the mirror. If people want to alter their appearance drastically by going under the knife or sticking needles in, I have to say that's up to them, but you can tell from the way I talk about it that I'm saddened if that's their route. I think it's a temporary fix for something else, and I think the best thing you can do is just really address the matter, look at yourself honestly, and then smile. It always looks better when you do.
Absolutely, I agree with you. And finally, makeup. You love makeup. What do you love about makeup? And of course, what do you love about Look Fabulous Forever?
I love makeup for lots of reasons. The transformative effect, the nurturing effect, the covering up effect, of course. You know, I know what's going on under here, but you needn't all see that, and I'm certainly not going to hold a magnifying glass to it. And I love the playfulness of it. I love the fact that if you're going out somewhere, you can think, what am I wearing? What do I put with that? And let's try this lipstick. And I've always really enjoyed playing at the makeup counter. Increasingly, of course, over the years, it's not their no-go zones. I don't regard anywhere as that really for me. But they're certainly not as welcoming as they were. They are definitely aimed at a younger woman. And actually now, I'm not even quite sure I know who she is. I've got younger daughters, and I don't think they're necessarily who's being reached out to either. But as far as makeup for this face, and for the faces, there's more of us than anyone else, let's face it. You know, the woman of 50 and up, we take up our space in this world. We've got the cash. And I think it's absolutely brilliant that there's something just for us that is accessible and playful and isn't asking you to hide away. I'm a bit puzzled by this notion of invisibility, because I think some of it is, it's a welcome thing. You know, when you're younger, it's not so much you're visible, but so is everybody else. You're in competition for the jobs, you're in competition for the partners, you're in competition for life. You are heading forwards and you're looking sideways. And suddenly you get to an age where you suddenly think, this is my path, I'm looking forward. I think it's because you can feel there's not as much of it. But again, you know, it's kind of a privilege to be even thinking like that. My mother died when she was 57, and although I am in no way flying the flag for the life she couldn't lead, I'm absolutely aware that I have years on her that she would have made the most of. So I certainly don't want to hide away. I don't regard myself as invisible unless I want to be, and sometimes that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Janet. It's been fantastic talking to you and hearing all about your life.
Enjoyed it.
And still, you know, still such an inspirational person to so many people, I think. So thank you for that. It was lovely.
Thank you.